We go. Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to the third week of our Tech by Summer Technology programs here going on here at the Schaumburg Library. This is the third week and third time we will be going through our web project development program. We all know in the springtime we had a Python project development where we were creating some awesome projects from Mastermind, Tic-Tac-Toe, learning about user interfaces and all that great stuff. Now in the summer, we're making our transition to a new programming language of JavaScript. And today we'll be continuing to make our way learning more fundamentals about the programming language of JavaScript and building some actual projects. Last week we got a good start, and this week we're going to keep on continuing to build on that and having some more fun with that. As always, guys, thank you so much for coming out here today. It's always nice to see that we have some new people coming in every week. And if you do know any friends, family who would like to join, have any interest about technology, would highly recommend that you let them know about Tech Bytes, sign them up on the Schaumburg Library's website, and get them signed up as well. So without any further ado, let's get to today's show. You guys should know who we are by now, guys. My name is Ryan Sneaky, us incoming freshman now at the University of Illinois at Chicago. About a month ago, graduated from James Buchanan High School, which a couple of you guys here will be going to, and I plan on majoring in computer science. And hopefully you guys are getting excited about this field as well. And perfect timing, my partner, Ryan.
Hey guys, my name is Labdi. I just like Ryan, I graduated from Conant like a month in like 2 days. But yeah, I'll be studying CS at UIUC, and currently I'm sitting outside, just outside of the Schaumburg Library. You can see it in the background, and yeah, enjoying the nice weather.
Are you eating ice cream?
I'm not actually. I can't eat and like enjoy the ice cream while working, teaching you guys. So I have it in the freezer. I'll eat it later on.
Yeah, you gotta enjoy it, Avanish. Well, let's get to today's agenda, which does not involve mint chocolate chip ice cream, but you know, that's the favorite, we all know. So today's June 23rd. We're gonna get started off, guys. You guys know with web product development, every day we have a little debate or something. Yesterday we had a would you rather, and then we had a debate. And today we're gonna have a this or that, continuing from last week. Then going to do a quick recap on our project, recap some terms and terminology, what we did last week, and then continue to make some way with our project for this week. So let's get to today's this or that. And before we get there, I'm pretty sure all
Before
of
we do, for those of you, I see a couple
new names.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I think I'm lagging or something. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, you're fine. Yep. So I think we do have a couple of new names. I did put the link to the Google Classroom before we got started, but once again, there it is. Be sure to join that, guys. Hit that link. All you need is a Google account, and you'll have access to all of our resources, including the code we do every week, along with our YouTube videos. So be sure to join that and let us know if you're having any difficulty. But now, let's get towards our this or that.
All right. So for this or that, YouTube or Netflix, or anything we watch, movies, documentaries, TV shows, YouTube or Netflix, which one? And of course, you gotta explain why. Okay, Avanish, I see Avanish is very opinionated.
Because I don't have Netflix.
Ah.
YouTube because it doesn't have Netflix. Okay.
Well, it's the same as me saying mint chocolate chip is not good because I've never had mint chocolate chip.
Exactly. You gotta try it and notice the best flavor.
Exactly.
YouTube is free, Netflix is paid. True. Chasing Netflix easily. Ishan, Netflix, it's addicting.
Yeah, but see, for YouTube, if you want to watch some like very popular movies, then you have to pay, like either rent them out or buy them, or even pay the subscription for YouTube.
I feel like for sure both have their pros and cons. Like YouTube, anything you can search up anything you want, but Netflix for movies and TV shows. What about, so for the people saying Netflix, we got Ishan, Chase. Any good shows or movies you guys have watched recently on Netflix?
Yeah, I watch a lot of different things on there.
So I started watching this new TV show, Shadow and Bone, with my sister. It's pretty intuitive. Like, it's interesting once you get into it, and yeah.
I've heard like the book series was really good. Like the
yeah.
Joe's saying YouTube has music too. Netflix has the content. It is a tough decision, yeah.
Yeah. See, but the quality for Netflix is always like we know there will be a level of quality, but for YouTube, some of those movies can be very pixelated.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, Netflix quality versus quantity, right? Is the argument. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, tutorials. Bjorn, is that how you pronounce your name? But yeah, it definitely YouTube.
My
has
name is
tutorials.
pronounced Bjorn.
Okay,
Netflix
Bjorn.
doesn't have tutorials and guides.
Yep. And all those computer science tutorials, even Tech Bytes videos
Yeah.
on YouTube, guys.
That's true. You're not going to find us on Netflix, right? Not for now, at least. But Harry Potter, you're saying?
Netflix is mostly like for shows and sitcoms and stuff like that, movies. How about
I just
Disney
want-
Plus? You guys should have added Disney Plus.
I'm just on. I usually watch like Last Airbender on Netflix. So
I actually started watching that for some reason. It's a pretty good show.
Netflix for shows, movies, and documentaries. I remember I used to watch Avatar, like, when was that, Nick Jr., was it? Or Nickelodeon, right? A long time ago. Demon Slayer. Yeah, so that's the idea, right? It's shows, movies, and documentaries versus a whole bunch of content. You could probably search some pretty down versions in quality of YouTube videos, like movies, like old movies, but new movies. Netflix has been keeping up recently, so. No age limit, yes, Avatar, a classic. Alrighty, well, looks like we got people from both sides here coming today. All right. Paritosh bringing up a question about next month's classes. Paritosh will be addressing that next Monday, so be sure, just stay tuned for that, but we'll be talking about what's happening with that and shifting the schedule. So stay tuned next Monday, we'll cover that. Alrighty, well, for today, now let's move on towards the project which we unveiled and sort of came about together from our discussions in the Google Classroom and the ideas you guys shared as well. That being an adventure game, which we're making a text-based adventure game with some user elements as well. As a reminder, we're going to be utilizing the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript for the logic, the CSS for some styling later on, and the HTML to hold all of our structure website, like the buttons, the text fields, all that good stuff. And we're going to use all three of these files to create a game where we are able to control the outcome of whatever happens. Like I said, HTML for the buttons, CSS for the styling, and the JavaScript for the logic. And then the goal will be to use the JavaScript to create some logic which will allow for multiple endings towards our adventure. And we're going to be creating an adventure where the user will have multiple options to choose on what next step they take, and we'll see where that ends up taking them.
Yep. And this week's goal, like Ryan said, is to create HTML buttons. So basically what we see on the screen and what the user is presented with. So basically get buttons and text on the screen. We won't be coding the specific logic because that is part of the JavaScript. Just reviewing what Ryan said in the previous slide, but today is just about creating what the user sees, and that will be using HTML, buttons and, initial text.
Exactly. So before we do get towards our project and start coding it, every week we've been unveiling and reviewing some old terms. Last week we did more with conditionals. The first week we talked more about variables and logic, all that good stuff. And this week, one more topic which we're going to touch upon. We've already covered loops as well. Yeah. So this week we got one more topic left, that being arrays in JavaScript. We've covered variables and how they allow us to hold different values, different pieces of data, right? Well, remember, arrays, the concept is still the same from Python. We're still able to hold multiple values in an array. So say we have an array of names. It could hold all of our names. We'll do a quick example of that as well. And essentially, arrays allow us to hold multiple values, and then we can access those values by iterating over them using some type of loop or printing out specific indexes. So as a quick little, let's do a quick little quiz right here. If I wanted to access this first element right here, the word hello, what position would I refer to? Do I remember? Thanks, Joe.
Yep, we got 0 in the chat.
Yep, Ishan saying 0 as well. Yeah, Sonia, good. Yep. So there's going to be a 0th index. The first index is the word my, and the second index is the word world. So remember that as we're going to go along, because we'll eventually be utilizing arrays when we're creating our storyline and coming up with that as well. So just a little recap on that concept.
And basically, that was a review. Overall, like Ryan said, we've covered the main topics with basics like fundamentals, including arrays, loops, conditionals over the 3 sessions. But it's time to finish today's goal. Add those buttons on using HTML and start with the initial scenario. So go, yeah. The link is in the chat, the JSFiddle link. You guys can look on there or look at the screen and code on your own JSFiddle.
Yep. So it is recommended, guys, if possible, you guys open up the website, create a new fiddle, so you guys can follow along. That's a better idea, so you guys are actually getting the experience of typing out the code. But if not, no worries, you can just follow along with us. The link, if you want to follow along. So I know we've had some issues with JSFiddle updating real time, so just be aware of that. But the link towards my code is in the chat as well. Oh wait, what if I hit the collaborate button? Okay, so if you guys have not already clicked the link, try going on this link. Is this any different? If I type something, can you guys see that?
Let's see. Oh yeah, I think so.
Oh, I can see everybody coming in. Oh, it's like Replit. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there's like a button here too. Okay, so JSFiddle's up to your game. All right. All right, cool. Yeah, if you guys want to follow along, that's much better instead of me having to hit the save button every time and you guys having to refresh. So join through that. Otherwise, if you'd like, you can open up a new fiddle, make an account, and start you can code as well. Exactly. So time for some JavaScript. All right, guys. So let's get on started. Now, before we do start creating our buttons, here's a quick little, want to do a quick little overview of what we're envisioning. Yesterday with MIT App Inventor, we talked about how it's a good idea to have a vision, right, of what we want to create. So for today's idea, we want to create some buttons, get the structure of our game sorted out with. What I'm thinking is that we're probably going to have some type of scenario which the user will be presented with. Then the user will have the option to choose what to do. You'll have 2 buttons right here. There'll be an option 1 in this box, and the second option will be in this box. Now, say they go with the first option, to say it's it could be any scenario. We'll think of that in the time coming up. But say they go with the first scenario, then they will be shown 2 different scenarios and options. So this will lead to a different scenario. So scenario number 2, which means that there will be 2 different options which they can now choose from. So a different option right here. Now you can see how this will lend itself to many, many more boxes coming about. It's like a prime factorization tree for math people right here. We're going to keep on going down. The second option, they'll have different options. So now we could do this in multiple ways. If we're going to think about it, say we're going to do a adventure game with 10 different scenarios which are presented, right? If we do 10 times 2, that's going to be 20 buttons, which wouldn't really make sense for us to write out in our HTML 20 different buttons. That would be pretty cluttered, right? So what we're going to do is just create 2 buttons initially, and we will use these same 2 buttons and their functions in order to represent the different options the user will have. So does that make sense to everybody, where we're not going to be utilizing 20 different buttons?
Yes.
All right. And next week, we'll be learning about something which will allow us to manipulate our HTML from our JavaScript, a little recap called the document object model, and how we can use JavaScript to change our HTML. So we'll update the text of our buttons. That's something for next week, but just a little overview right there. So with our idea for this week of visualize, how about we actually get towards coding it? All right, so first things first is that we're just going to create two simple buttons. I'm just going to say button, and then we just do remember the greater than sign, the word button, and then close it off with the other greater than sign. And then we can write whatever we want our button to be called. So for now, I'm just going to say option number 1. Hit run. We can make sure that we're seeing the button is coming up on our screen. What I'm going to do now is do the same exact thing. Yep, so I can see somebody already typing away. Option number 2. Remember, we're going to need to create a button for that. So I'm just going to say button, and then drag and drop that text inside our button. So now hit run. There we go. We already got 2 different buttons. Now, last week we sort of started to touch upon this idea that each button is unique, and we're going to have to refer to these buttons eventually. So for now, what I'm going to do is give this button an ID. Remember, an ID is what identifies any button. So this button is unique by its own because it is referred to its unique ID. So I'll give it an ID of, say, button, or we'll say button 1. We'll call it button 1, yeah. I'm going to do the same thing now for the second button we have and say that this button is unique and it's going to be called button number 2. We're just giving our buttons names which we can later refer to. All right, hit run. There we go. Our buttons, although they're there, they aren't doing anything at the moment. And the reason is because there's no scenario which we've already presented, let alone a storyline which we got going on. So right now, what we have is initially we're going to have some type of scenario at the top in text, and the user will then have to make a decision as to what happens. For now, we're not going to be adding any images or making it look nice with our CSS or adding anything too crazy. So what I'm going to do is move on towards our JavaScript for now in order to come up with some type of initial scenario which we can present with our text. So before we do get to our JavaScript, we're going to need a place to hold our text. So what I'm going to do is create something which we've slightly talked about called a paragraph tag. Now, paragraph tag is the same idea. It's going to allow us to hold pieces of text, unlike a button which holds a button. Text. Whoa. What do we got going on here, guys? Let's not mess up with any of the settings for now. That's a lot of pointers.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to change my name.
Oh, okay. So in order to create a paragraph tag, which will allow us to hold text, we're going to do the same thing. A greater than sign, then the letter P, and then cap that off. And then we can add any text here. So we can just say hello. There we go. We can see the word hello right there. All right, so now one thing which I want to notice on today is, since we're doing more stuff with the HTML, is if I were to change the paragraph tag to a H tag, say I call this H1, this is a bit different. If I hit the run button, it becomes much larger. Now this is something which you guys learn about in HTML is if I make this an H2 now, this will then become smaller. If I make this an H3 tag, this will become even smaller. So HTML allows us to hold different types of elements and text in our website format, right? So if I go with a paragraph, then a P tag, which stands for paragraph, that becomes much smaller text. So there are a lot of different text we can mess around with. If I make this a P2, this becomes even smaller. For now, we'll stick with a P tag. All right, so now it's time for us to start thinking of what the initial scenario the user will be presented with. And just like I did for the buttons, I'm going to give my paragraph tag, aka the place which is going to hold the text, an ID. So I'll just say it equals the scenarios. All right, so now we can actually get going towards our JavaScript in order to present the user with an initial scenario. So what I'm going to do is, and you remember, what do we do to create a function in JavaScript? The syntax? Well, to create a function, it's pretty, given a hint right there.
Yeah, you have to do like function and then var equal to.
Yep, exactly. So function and then the function name. So for now, since we're just going to be setting up our game, I'm just going to call this function game setup. Add the open and close parentheses and then add the braces. There we go. And now inside of this function, we have to manipulate our HTML in order to show the initial scenario. So now we have a couple of different options. We can think of one storyline and have the same the same initial scenario which the user goes off of. We could have different initial scenarios which the user can then go off of. For now, we're just going to go with one initial scenario, and then we can come about and go with different options as we go along. So what I'm going to do for now is save our initial scenario, just a variable to hold the initial scenario. Add our quotation marks. So now comes the time where we have to think about what direction do we want to take this adventure game in? What do we want it to be about? Is there a storyline which we already have in mind? Anybody have any ideas?
It could be, I'm thinking like medieval.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, like a fantasy one.
Fantasy, okay.
Or you were like in a camp with some people and then you got lost by exploring something and then you just have to survive.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
And then you like come across something and then it asks the user what you should do.
Okay, so like an adventure survival type game?
Yeah.
Okay, so definitely. So that's going to be interesting because then what we can start doing is have a health associated with the user, and every decision they make, their health could be impacted. And then eventually, until their health is zero, well, the game will keep on going on. Pariko is saying a space adventure. Okay, so space survival maybe? Okay, so I like that idea. We can go with a space survival type game. So the theme could be space survival. Okay. So how about this? For our initial scenario, we can go with, we were talking about extraterrestrial life, like Mars and all that earlier this week. So we can say you have the option to visit another planet beyond Earth. You can choose between, how about Mars, and what's another planet you guys want to visit?
Saturn.
Not anything Saturn? Okay, Mars and...
I don't know. I heard it rains diamonds there, so pretty cool.
Rains and diamonds, okay. Which one do you choose? All right, so that can be our initial scenario then. So now we have our scenario. Now we have to update our HTML in order to show that scenario and how the user has to choose between two options, right? This is where something called the document object model will come into play. This is how we can use our JavaScript in order to manipulate our HTML. So what I'm going to do is type a long line of code, which I want you guys to follow along with. I'm going to say document dot get capital E element, capital B by, capital I ID, open and close parentheses. Now, what I'm seeing right here is I'm going to retrieve whatever ID I want to refer to. So we already declared the ID for our paragraph tag to be scenarios. So I'm just going to copy that ID and paste it in quotation marks in the close parentheses. Now, this is the reference to our paragraph tag. What we have to do now is actually change the HTML. So I'm going to do dot, follow along and say dot inner HTML. HTML is all in uppercase, is equal to our initial scenario variable. So once again, the document.get element by ID, this is getting a reference towards our paragraph tag. Then, in order to actually change whatever text we have displayed there, we have to do dot inner HTML in order to change it to our initial scenario. So this will allow us to make sure that the word hello is changed to this initial scenario text. All right, so now if I hit run, we're still going to see that our text isn't being updated. And the reason why, and you know why? Why is that happening?
First of all, your initial scenario, it's like blue color, mine isn't blue.
It might be because maybe you didn't spell it right. It happens when some letters are off. You check that out, Manish?
Oh,
Yep. All right, so we've had this problem in Python too, right? When we have function, we have code, but it doesn't run. Anybody want to take a guess why it's not, our function isn't working? Each time
then call it.
Exactly. The main idea is we are not calling it anywhere, right? Now, our game setup function, it doesn't really require the user to click a button. We could have a start button with the user. So that's a good idea, actually. So let's do that. We'll create a different button right here. Same idea, button. And we'll say start game. All right, and we'll give this button ID as well. We'll say start game button. If I hit run, there we go. We can see our start game button is there. Now, eventually, we'll make this look much nicer, but for now, it will do. So now, what we have to do is connect our start game button towards our function, which we created called game setup. So in order to do that, it's pretty.
All the color things are blocking the code.
There's a bunch of. Let me see if there's like a way to remove all those cursors.
Yeah, I'm surprised they put that in.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't.
Live code validation. I don't. No, that's probably not it. Clear console on run. That might be it.
That's
Oh wait.
Hit run. Yeah. Oh well.
Well, I changed my name and all, so I've signed into this again. So I think it's like Replit where it makes you sign in every time.
I think it's just the way JSFiddle works. It will show the cursor.
Oh, where'd everybody go? Are you guys still there on the link?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, so the cursors aren't there, but.
Yeah, I think you got rid of them now.
I don't see the code on your.
Well, now you can't see the cursors because you can't see this, right?
Nope.
Yeah, you can't.
All right. All right, so now let's get towards actually connecting our function. So remember, it's pretty simple. We just do on the click of our button, we're going to call a function. We're going to call the game setup function at the opening close parentheses. And now, if I hit run and hit the start game button, there we go. We see our initial text popping up. All right, so hopefully everybody is following along. Anybody have any questions, please do let us know. So what we just did is we made a function, and made a button, called that function with the button, and presented our initial scenario. Alrighty. Now, it would be probably a good idea to not show our start game button after we clicked it, right? After it's been clicked, it could disappear, right? So this is what we're going to do is learning more about how we can manipulate our HTML. So what we're going to do is, once again, refer to our button. So you can use document.getElement by ID, add the open and close parentheses, and then refer to your button name. So our button name was start game button. And what we're going to do now is say dot the visibility of the button. So once again, we're getting the reference towards our button, and now we're going to be changing the visibility. This is accessing another property about our button. And now instead of it being visible, we want to make it not visible, aka hidden. So we add opening close parentheses, quotation marks, and then just type the word hidden. So now if I hit run, hit the button, start game, it's still staying there. Oh, that's right. Okay, so one more thing. We're accessing a different, so as we're referring, right, we're referring towards our paragraph tag, we're referring towards our button. Whenever we add a dot anything, we're referring towards a property of the paragraph tag or the button. Now, the property which allows us to access the visibility is through the CSS. So we have to access the style. So we do dot style dot visibility. So what's the thing in English is, hey, refer towards, get the reference towards our button, the start game button. Then refer towards the CSS associated with that button. And then in the CSS, refer towards the visibility of the button and change the visibility to the button being hidden on the click. Now, if I hit run, hit start game, there we go. We see that our button disappears. Alrighty. Now what we have to start thinking is, how do we change the text on our buttons whenever a new scenario is presented, right? Now this is where this idea of using the document object model in order to manipulate our HTML is going to come more into play, and it would probably be smart for us to start holding the options which the user has. You know, so right now we have an initial scenario, right? It's just two sentences, but when we start thinking about our game, the different options the user will have, probably will make sense to hold all those different options in what format instead of holding every single option in a variable. What would be more convenient? What concept?
And it's a concept we learned about today.
Can you say that again?
Yep, so right now our goal is going to be to
We could use CSS.
So Paritosh, remember CSS allows us to change like the style of our buttons. That's a good idea. We want to change the style, we change the text, right? So we'll get to that. We want to make sure that our buttons show the option of Mars and Saturn because those are the two options we have. Now, what I'm thinking is in the long term, if I wanted to hold all the different options, that would be like 20 different variables, right? What would be a smarter choice for us to do to hold the different options the user will have? It's a concept we covered today, Intent.
Yep, Sonia in the chat. All right, perfect.
Exactly, yep. So what I'm going to do is create an array outside of our function, aka a variable, and more specifically, it's a global variable because it's outside of our function. It can be accessed anywhere through our program. So I'm going to say var first options equal an array, and then what I'm going to do is create another array called var second options, and this will also be an array holding all the secondary options the user will have. All right, so now in our first options array, I'm going to hold the first option user will have. We can say that the first option will be represented with Mars. And then the second option will be represented with Saturn. All right, so we got our arrays. Although, you know, the purpose of an array is to hold multiple values. We'll eventually, and next week especially, start adding many more options. But for now, we're just holding the first option, which the user will have. Now, our goal is to show Mars and Saturn on these buttons when the user is presented with the initial scenario. So what we're going to do now is create a new function, which will be responsible for going through all of the different options the user will eventually have. So what I'm going to do is say function display options. Add the open close parentheses, add the braces. And this function will allow us, we'll add some code to show the different options the user has. Alrighty, so now we have to change the text of our buttons. And in order to do that, we have to access the elements in our array. So before we get there, what I'm going to do is create, so actually, I'll let you guys answer that question. If we start thinking, okay, so let's do this first. Let's just change the text of our button, and then we'll talk about what we can do to make this more efficient. So anybody have an idea what we're going to do to change the text? What's going to be similar from this line of code? What's going to be similar? Anybody have an idea?
Maybe you take like a database of all like the you want to change like the font, right?
So we want to change the text, right? And in order to do that, we have to refer towards our button. So what I'm going to do is copy the first
Oh,
part.
and then maybe you can like copy and paste that, and then you can change it to what you want right now.
Exactly. Yep. So we're going to say we're going to get the reference document.getElement by ID, getting the reference towards our first button, and then we're going to do dot. I believe it is the value of the button is going to be equal to. Now this is where we have to make the reference to our array. And we want to access that element which represents Mars. So just like Python is similar, we're going to call our array. And then what position? Am I going to say the 0th or the first position to get that the word Mars?
0.
Exactly, yep. That will be represented by the 0th position. And then we can apply the same thing towards our second button. So document.getElement by ID, button 2, and the value of that, we're just going to use the second array we made called second options. Now we've created our function. If I hit run, start game, our button values still don't change. And it's because of that issue we've always talked about. We're not calling our function display options. So what we're going to do is go into our game setup function and then just write that function name, aka call that function from inside our game setup function. And now if I hit run, hit start game, we still don't see the value of our buttons changing. So I believe it might be a different property we got to access. So let's try dot inner HTML, it might be. So if I hit run, start game, yeah, there we go. Okay, so it's dot inner HTML still. So change the dot value to dot inner HTML for both buttons, getting the reference towards the button, and then changing the property of the text. Now, if we hit run, hit start game, there we go. You have the option to visit a new planet. Which one do you choose, Mars or Saturn? And then we got the 2 buttons representing Mars and Saturn. So just to recap today.
I still have like the button named option 1, option 2.
So the ID?
Yeah, like when I click run, it doesn't say Mars and Saturn for me, like the button. It says option 1, option 2.
Do you have the property .innerHTML, or are you changing, Hamish?
Yeah, I just did it.
The document.getElement by ID, referring to button number 1.
Yeah, wait, let me check if I typed it good. Yeah, I did type it like all correctly, but it still doesn't show.
All right, stick around and then we'll take a look after. Alrighty, so just a quick recap for today, guys. If you do have any questions, be sure to stick around if you're any trouble on the code. But today we started with our array, some options, got the initial scenario for the user, and then added a function which will allow us to shift through the different options the user will have. Along with that, we also got to create some of our HTML and structure for our game. We'll continue to keep on making progress, adding more logic next week, especially with our game. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this game, and although it seems pretty, white and bland right now, we'll eventually make it look nice and a bit more animated in the coming weeks. All right, guys. Well, that brings us till the end for this week's project development. Hope you guys are having a good time with these summer technology programs. As a reminder, there is no gaming hour tomorrow, so we will be catching you guys next Monday, updating you guys about our July schedule as well. Until then, remember, stay tuned in the Google Classroom. We'll get you guys on the next one. See you guys.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Can I share my screen?